Have you ever dreamed of being able to predict the future? What if we told you there is a way to do that, and not only it's a scientific method, but it also doesn't require being trained in the magical arts? Unfortunately, you won't be able to save the world or predict lottery numbers. However, if you practice constantly, this method will allow you to greatly improve the accuracy of your predictions about the future. This method is described by Professor Philip Tetlock and journalist Dan Gardner in Super Forecasting. Amongst other topics, this book analyzes the characteristics of a group of people known as super forecasters, whose prediction of future events turned out to be much more accurate than the average forecast, almost as if they were actual modern seers. In today's video, we'll learn about these people and what we can do to learn how to think like them. Some years ago, there was a lot of talk about a curious story. A group of scientists had made some experiments in which they compared forecasts of future events, such as elections or the stock market's trend, made by political analysts, journalists, and economists, with those made by a group of dart-throwing chimps. The results showed that the forecasting skills of the two groups were nearly identical. Experts and chimpanzees seemed to be equally apt at leading us toward the future. These experiments were real, conducted by Philip Tetlock, back then a researcher in political psychology. His conclusion has since been used to ridicule the actual skills of experts, but this interpretation is partially deceiving. Amongst those experts were some who seemed to perform far better than the average, being able to predict future events with astonishing accuracy. These seers became the main topic of Tetlock's research. In the following years, many tournaments were organized in order to find other individuals like them, not only amongst experts, but amongst the general population. A project that took multiple years and was funded by the US government itself finally identified a group of perfectly normal people who could make forecasts with incredible precision. Members of such group were called super forecasters. These 21st century Nostradamuses were meticulously studied, and researchers were able to pinpoint some of their key traits. By learning how to think like them, we too can improve our ability to predict the future. Let's find out how. The first trait is to avoid cognitive biases. Instinctively, we might think, well, surely these super forecasters are geniuses with an IQ like Einstein's. Well, it's not completely true. And their first key trait is that they know how to avoid cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are systematic reasoning mistakes. Because of the way our brain is wired, all of us, yes, even geniuses with a sky-high IQ, tend to make them. We told more in depth about biases in this video. By incurring in the planning fallacy, for example, we underestimate the time we will need to complete a task. Most of us will make an estimate without thinking too much about it. We'd make a mistake, and then we will find ourselves 3 days before the exam with hundreds of pages to read. Super forecasters, on the other hand, are aware of these trends and know how to check them. For example, when estimating how long will it take them to study for an exam, super forecasters know to avoid the planning fallacy by using the so-called outside view. That is, they ask some colleagues who already took the exam how long did it take them. Only after collecting opinions from other people, the super forecaster put them together to make their estimate. Which brings us to the next point. They know how to put together different judgments. The ability to look past our own point of view doesn't come natural. We try to avoid wasting mental energy by listening to the opinion of others, and we'd sooner accept the risk of not being able to study properly for the exam, which results in us spending much more time studying than anticipated. Super forecasters, on the other hand, make their predictions on the future by combining data and judgments from different sources. No matter the prediction we want to make, from how long will it take me to study for the exam to who will win the next election, we must learn to combine data and opinions from different sources. They think in terms of probabilities. Another thing we might think about super forecaster is that they are mathematical geniuses. And again, we will be partially wrong. What they did learn to do extremely well is simply to think in terms of probabilities. Just about any daily situation brings us questions whose answer is either yes, no, or maybe, without much thinking about what this maybe actually means. Super forecasters train themselves constantly to be able to quantify that maybe in terms of probabilities. When asked, do you think you'll pass private law? They wouldn't answer with a shaky, Uno, maybe, possibly, yeah. On the contrary, they will try to quantify all the data they have on their knowledge and say, there's a 75% chance I'll pass the exam. With time, they tend to notice more and more nuances. I know what you're thinking. These super forecasters don't seem like they're fun at parties. Indeed, in some contexts, it's probably better to leave aside probabilistic thinking and answer more directly. Just imagine what will happen if you are asked, "Do you love me?" and you answer with, "I'd say I love you 75%. But when it comes to important decisions, such as laying out our study plan, knowing how to quantify that maybe in terms of probabilities can help us manage uncertainty as well. They have a growth mindset. Working by making forecasts about the future means you will have to deal with uncertainty and failure. Surely, there's nothing more frustrating than a situation in which things we hadn't forecast happen every day. Super forecasters are of a different opinion. They see these failures as stimulating, and they do so because they have adopted a growth mindset. But what does it mean? Imagine two people are learning how to drive. They both make a lot of mistakes. They hit the brakes at full speed, take wrong turns, and never shift gears when they should. One of them, with a fixed mindset, will hear a voice in their head saying, "See, you can drive to save your life. You'll just keep on failing." The other, with a growth mindset, will think, "Okay, so I don't know how to drive yet. What can I do to get better?" The first person will become frustrated, won't be able to improve, and will tend to see learning as a source of anxiety. The other will see mistakes as incentives to get motivated and improve. Super forecasters sees every mistake in their predictions as an opportunity to learn and to improve their ability to think with more accuracy. With this in mind, learning to ignore that little voice highlighting failures instead of learning, we too can develop a growth mindset. They know which questions to ask. The last trait of a super forecaster is the ability to ask the right questions. Imagine you have just started university and ask yourself, will I graduate on time and with full marks? Of course, you won't be able to answer that. The question is too general and the possible answer is too distant in the future. What a super forecaster will do is to formulate a clearer question. They will ask themselves precisely, what are my chances of graduating with full marks within the last session for thesis examination available in a set time period? Now, the question is much clearer, but it's still too difficult to answer. But we are now developing a growth mindset and obstacles are simulating to us. The next step is to split the main question into smaller, simpler questions. First of all, we must identify what we need to do to graduate with full marks. Then, we could write a list of exams we still need to pass, talk with students we have already passed them, and try to group them based on their difficulty. The harder they are, the lower our chances of passing them with a higher mark. We can then try to estimate the time we'll need to study for them again, in case we don't pass with a sufficiently high mark, and so on, until we find simple questions to which we can assign an accurate grade of probability. We'll leave the rest of the exercise to you. The important thing to keep in mind is that in order to improve our forecasting skills, we need to learn how to keep our biases in check, look beyond our personal point of view, think in terms of probabilities, develop a growth mindset, and ask the right questions. We invite you to start now with a simple exercise. Keeping in mind the advice you found in the video, leave us a comment with a forecast about the number of views this same video will have by the end of the year. In December, we will pin the comment that came closer to the actual number. See you in the next video.